Man, I'm glad you could join me. This is Tom Zutaut at Can You Get Me In? I'm in the city of Chattanooga, walking across the Tennessee River, standing on the iconic Walnut Street Bridge. Man, this takes me back to 1984. I was standing on another bridge in 1984. I was at the Stagecoach Trailhead crossing the American River with Steve Klausman, who managed this awesome and iconic band called City Kid. And he took me panning for gold, and I ended up getting a big gold nugget. And I got to tell you, you know, that's where the California gold rush started. It blew my mind that you could still find a giant nugget of gold in 1984 in that river. And even though I didn't like the name much, I decided that it was such good luck finding that pan of gold. If this band were good and they were good musicians, had great songs, I would figure it out. The band was comprised of Brian Wheat on bass. And let me tell you, that man has got a head of hair. He's still got the most awesome head of hair you'll ever see. And I remember that before he would sign with me, you know, and I had to keep telling the band that they'd have to wait a year for me to move over to Geffen Records and to keep it a secret. And anyway, he wanted me to meet his Italian mom, and I met her, and I told her that I was going to make her son a rock star. And she literally looked at me and she said, "You're full of shit." And I was kind of taken aback by it, but I just looked at her in calm way. I said, "Ma'am," I said, "I promise you every word I've just told you is true. You're going to see your son on the cover of magazines in the 7-Eleven. And she said, "Now I think you're even more full of shit." Frank Hannon, Brian played bass, by the way. Frank Hannon, the guitar player. So, you know, during that overlapping time, you know, I went to his granny's house. He was living with his granny, and, you know, I call him Mr. Wizard because he's kind of introverted, and he didn't talk much. He did all these emoting through his guitar, and he had this little, like, cassette recorder, and he panned stuff, and I'm in his bedroom. He's got, like, a quad speaker set up, and he's panning stuff, and I'm hearing guitars here, behind me, in front of me, and he played me a bunch of ideas that later ended up as great songs on Tesla Records. But the funniest part is I looked at him and I said, "Frank, you're holding out on me, man." I said, "Where's that last cassette with the great song on it?" And he says to me, he goes, "I don't know, I think you got them all." And I said, "Nah, man, you're holding out on me." And I pulled open his dresser, and in his underwear drawer, I kid you not, there was this cassette tape buried. And I said, "Frank, I'm telling you, we got to listen to this one, because this is probably where you hide all your good songs. I have no doubt." Guess what diddle was on that cassette tape? What later became Love Song, probably, if not their biggest hit, other than Signs, one of their biggest hits. And then you had Troy Luccketta. And what was funny about Troy Luccketta, you got to remember, Frank was a teenager. The other guys weren't much older than Frank, you know, maybe a year older, maybe just out of being teenagers. But Troy Luccketta, I had actually met him because he was the only good musician in the Eric Martin band at the time. And he was the drummer for Eric Martin. Eric Martin was signed at Elektra, and so I had met him, and so that gave me some familiarity. And then after Troy Luccketta, you know, you had Jeff Keith, and this guy reminded me of one of my favorite bands. He had such an amazing voice, and that band would have been Steve Marriott, the singer of Humble Pie, Jeff Keith, the singer of City Kid. And after that, you had Tommy Skeoch, and he was like the wild and crazy element. You know, he was like a grunge kid and a thrasher guitar player. So you took Frank Hannon's Mr. Wizard and you put it together with Tommy Skeo's Thrasher guitar, and it was awesome, those two things together. That comprised the band City Kid. So we're down on the river panning for gold. I've got the giant nugget. I can't believe it. Like all these years after 1849, you can still get gold out of the river. So Steve Klossman goes, man, he goes, you're one lucky dude. He goes, I panned this river. I never got a nugget that big. You're a special guy. He goes, I got a special brunch prepared back at the house. So Steve Klossman was City Kid's manager, and he lived in this big wooden house, redwood house, I think it was, in the mountains. And I went back there, and his wife had prepared this gigantic brunch spread. Everything you can think of that you've seen on the largest menu at a breakfast restaurant. It was all laid out. We ate this brunch, and then we just kind of talked, and I told him why he should, trust me, that I would bring the band to Geffen. It'd be my first signing at Geffen. And then it was time to go to the club, and, I still look at that nugget of gold as being like a sign from above, this would be a big band. So I go to the club, I see the band play, and they are freaking awesome, man. They are so great. Frank is such an amazing guitar player. Tommy Skeo is an amazing guitar player. They're doing this like Thin Lizzy dual lead stuff like Brian Robertson and Scott Gorham from Thin Lizzy did. They're doing some of that kind of stuff. Jeff Keith literally has one of the greatest voices I have ever heard, and his voice is still great when you go see Tesla play, like I did at the Coca-Cola Roxy in Atlanta last week. So, and the thing that stood out about them to me is, here are these young men, a teenager and young men, that are crazy, great musicians. So what makes a great band? A band that has great musicianship, great songs, and great charisma on the stage. That's what makes a great band. They have all the elements of a great band except for a great name. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. As I stood in that club and I reflected about how awesome and inspiring these young men were on the stage, I took a breath, and I was grateful that Jack Russell, the singer from Great White, and his manager, Alan Niven, kept bugging me to see these City Kids. And City Kid was such a bad name that I avoided it for a long time, and finally Jack Russell came by my office, and he literally stood in front of me and said, you need to go see City Kid. What the hell is wrong with you? Go see this band. You're going to love them. And boy, in that moment, I was glad I did. I was so glad I went to see them. But what about that name? So a year and a half goes by, and we still got the problem of the name. I mean, we've already made the record with Steve Thompson and Michael Barbiero up in Woodstock, New York at Bearsville. The famous studio, Todd Rundgren, Albert Grossman, Bob Dylan. Like, this was a famous studio that Albert Grossman built, an iconic manager in the music business, manager Bob Dylan and many others. So finally, I'm talking to Cliff Bernstein and Peter Mensch, who I took to Tesla and said, you guys should manage the band. They're the iconic managers of the music business. So I was just coincidentally, I was reading a book about Nikola Tesla at that time, and Cliff and I started talking about it, and I think maybe he was simultaneously reading the book, or maybe I mentioned it to him, and I was telling Cliff that I felt like you could do so much with Nikola Tesla. I mean, heck, Elon Musk named his cars after Tesla, and we're talking about Tesla, the band, right? So that is how City Kid became Tesla. So I'm on a plane from Los Angeles to Sacramento with the book, and I'm going to give the band a shot to come up with a name. And we're sitting in a boardroom at the Claremont Hotel in Sacramento with the band, and we're discussing our progress and mixes and the album and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, guys, we got to pick a name today, because the music's done, we need to master it, but we got to do an album cover. And City Kid just ain't gonna fly. Can you guys see yourselves at 60 years old still being City Kid? I said, I don't think so. So anyway, I get into the boardroom and I go around the room and I ask each member if they have some names. And one by one, they're like, I just can't think of any. I wrote stuff down. I don't like it. And I look at the band and I say, Tesla. And I give them the book. They pass it around and I'm telling them about all the cool images. And, I had one of those Tesla globes. You put your hands on it. It sparks like lightning. And I showed them a picture of that. And I said, there's so much we can do with that. And so the band were like, yeah, Tesla it is, man, let's go. So now we got a new name. But what was it like working with these guys? Well, to be honest with you, I wish I could tell all kinds of crazy stories and antics, but really it was easy to work with them because they were all about getting it done. They were all about their musicianship, their songwriting, their professionalism, and their hard work ethic. It was all about that. And when you think back, right, this is a band that didn't get much press. There was no wild stories about them circulating. They made it on truly great musicianship, truly great songs, and Jeff Keith's great voice, Troy's awesome drumming, Brian's killer bass, and Tommy and Frank's killer guitar dichotomy. So, of all the bands I worked with, right, this was, I call musicians musician. I'm going to define that. Nikki Sixx called me and said, I heard that Tesla record, man. I love it. I love that record. And I had many of my other bands, like over the years, tell me that they love Tesla. In fact, when I moved to Chattanooga, one of the things that blows my mind is how much people here in the South, Chattanooga, North Georgia, where I live, northeastern Georgia and southwestern Tennessee, this is a Tesla hotbed. I did a storytelling event, about 150 people were there. There were like 20 people lined up for questions, and 12 or 13 of the questions were about Tesla. So that's how much they love Tesla here. I'm glad I'm living in a Tesla hotbed. Well, while we're talking about Tesla and recordings, when I was at the Coca-Cola Roxy, this is actually the first thing we released. It's a 12-inch of Modern Day Cowboy, the iconic song where Slim Pickens rides the atomic bomb down before it blows up. Man, it took us a minute to get Slim Pickens to approve it, his estate. This is that first album, and when I was up in that boardroom at that hotel talking to the band about the imagery, this is exactly what we were talking about, right? An iconic logo with electricity around it. And believe it or not, the guys brought this up to me last week. They had to sit for over an hour and be still while the guy drew all the sparks around them. And this is something that we did, which was a promotional piece for the first album. We took every song on Mechanical Resonance, the first Tesla album, and we put it in what we called the Tesla rock box. And so each song had its own sleeve. And when we were at the Coca-Cola Roxy, I got the guys to sign it. And I'm so proud of this. It's a rare item, man. If you can find one in a store somewhere, buy it. This is the great radio controversy. Includes the iconic songs Hang Tough, Heaven's Trail, Love Song. Yes, the Love Song. The one I found in Frank Hannon's underwear drawer at his granny's house. Now let's talk about what's happening here in a couple weeks. So on April 12th, it will be Record Store Day. And last year on Record Store Day, this record came out, and it's on red vinyl, and this is volume 1. And I want you to get a good look at it because I I did the album art. I wrote, this is my handwriting, and I wrote all of the, what you see here on this cover on an old Scotch tape box. And here's the back. We took a picture of each of the guys, and you can see the production credit right there. And now I'm going to show you on April 12th, in a few weeks here, you'll be able to get Reel 2. This is Reel 1. And we did a really cool marketing thing when this came out. You could buy Reel 1 in a store, but the only way you could get Reel 2 is if you went to a Tesla concert, and you got it for free. So literally, when we did the tour for Reel to Reel, you bought Reel 1. In case you forgot to buy it, we had some for sale. But your concert ticket got you a free copy of Reel 2, and the Reel 1 box had the spot for it. And here's one that this is now available again. And the guy signed this one for me last week at the Coca-Cola Roxy in Atlanta. And of course I had to open it up so that they could sign it. And it gives you all the details on the songs and everything. And we made the inner sleeves even look pretty cool, like the reel of tape is coming out of the box. So again, Reel 2 out on clear red vinyl on April 12th for Record Store Day. And the last thing I wanted to show you, because some of you Tesla fanatics, this is the set list from the Coca-Cola Roxy, signed by the band. I hope you enjoyed my Tesla story today. In the future, sometime later this year, I'm going to be going up to Brian Wheat's place, and he and I are going to sit down and tell stories and memories of our Tesla ride. I've spent a lot of time at Brian's houses hanging out, producing these records, and strategizing Tesla's takeover of the world. I hope to do the same with Frank Hannon and Jeff Keith, the original members. I think they all have great stories to tell. In the meantime, wherever you're streaming this on social media, please like, follow, and subscribe, because that helps us grow and reach more people. This is Tom Zutaut at Can You Get Me In? Until next week.